Really appreciate everyone taking the time to join this webinar today. My name is Ryan Erickson Kulas. I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Program Operations at Michelson Philanthropies. And today we're going to be discussing our upcoming Student Basic Needs funding cycle within the Michelson Spark Grant Program. We will have time at the end of this conversation for me to answer questions. So as questions come up, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. And then again, at the end, I will kind of review those and answer those to the best of my ability. I was supposed to have a colleague join me, but unfortunately they had a conflict come up. So I will do my best to monitor the chat, but it will be a bit challenging on my side. But certainly as we get to the end, I'll be able to jump in there. Just a quick overview of kind of our conversation for today. So first, I'm going to provide an overview of the Michelson 20mm Foundation, and then talk a little bit about our Spark grant program. I'll talk about the specifics of our review process for applications. I'll provide some examples of some previous awardees so that y'all have a sense of the types of projects that we've funded in the past. And then, as I mentioned, we'll go through the Q&A section. So as questions come up throughout this presentation, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A. So if you're not familiar with the Michelson 20mm Foundation, we are founded and funded by Dr. Gary K. Michelson. Dr. Michelson is a retired physician who made his fortune in inventing medical devices and then patenting those devices. He has since retired from medicine and he has devoted himself to philanthropy. Michelson Philanthropies is the umbrella organization that comprises a few different foundations. The Michelson 20mm Foundation is the foundation primarily focused on higher education access and affordability. Other foundations that Dr. Michelson supports includes Michelson Found Animals, which is an animal welfare organization, and the Michelson Medical Research Foundation, which is focused on medical research in and around immunology. Our mission at Michelson 20mm is to accelerate progress towards a more just world by investing in tech entrepreneurs, change makers, and policy to catalyze scalable innovations in the knowledge economy. We seek to activate humanity's full potential through equitable education and economic opportunities. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the ways that we do that, just so that y'all have a kind of holistic understanding of our foundation. And then we'll dive into the specifics of our student basic needs work. As I mentioned, Dr. Michelson made his fortune in inventing medical devices and then patenting those devices. And so he is very passionate about bringing intellectual property education to the masses. We, in addition to our student basic needs work, operate the Michelson IP Institute, which is meant to bring education in and around IP to students, inventors, entrepreneurs, essentially giving them the tools to be able to capitalize on their IP in a similar fashion to how Dr. Michelson was able to. Now, in addition to our student basic needs work, I did want to touch on a few other areas of our work. Each of these three have distinct Spark grant cycles. We run these on a quarterly basis. So feel free to be on the lookout for any upcoming funding opportunities within this. Open educational resources is actually how the Michelson 20mm Foundation got its start. Over a decade ago, Dr. Michelson read a story about students at Santa Ana College in California not being able to progress simply because of the high cost of textbooks. At the time, he gave a scholarship for that, but realized that it didn't address the root of the issue. And so the Michelson 20mm Foundation was an early supporter of OpenStax, a nonprofit open educational resource publishing company. This initiative within our work seeks to reduce the cost of textbooks and promulgate the usage of OER, which are freely licensed instructional materials. In 2020, our most recent initiative was launched, which was our digital equity work, with students transitioning from primarily being in the classroom to having to go through class in a remote setting. we realized that not everyone was equipped to be able to succeed within that such circumstance, whether it be access to high-speed broadband, whether it be access to devices, or whether it be access to digital literacy in order to utilize those. So our work focuses on bridging the digital divide within California. And then the last thing that I'll talk about prior to jumping into our our student basic needs work is our Smart Justice Initiative. So this looks at the intersection of the criminal justice system and the higher education system and looks to support those that are currently or formerly incarcerated as they pursue educational as well as vocational opportunities. And I'll highlight some of our past grantees from some of these work towards the end of my presentation. But we're here today to talk about student basic needs, and that's what our funding cycle is focused on. We're looking to increase persistence and graduation rates through systemic change, technological innovations that essentially help students meet their basic needs. So when we talk about the specifics of the Spark grant cycle, just some kind of high level details for y'all to be aware of. We are seeking to fund things that would not be possible if they had to wait through a traditional grant process. Our commitment is to making a decision on all applications within 6 weeks of our call for proposals closing. So we're really looking for kind of innovative, just-in-time opportunities that meet urgent needs for organizations. This funding cycle will open on December 1st and it will close on December 15th. So there'll be about a 2 week period to submit your letter of intent. And again, we'll go through some of the specifics of what that looks like and how the process kind of moves forward in just a bit. Spark grants are available to United States-based nonprofits as well as educational institutions. Generally, we will run grants through an educational institution's foundation. We do ask that the work that our grant is supporting impacts California and California students. That can be kind of interpreted in a variety of different ways. Sometimes there is work being done on a national level that will have an impact on California. Sometimes it's more of a California specific, but it is a requirement that our work does impact California students. We do give priority to grants that are scalable or have more of a system-based approach. Generally, if we're looking at proposals that would have an impact perhaps on one specific campus, but not necessarily a way to scale out beyond that. And there's another proposal that has more of a systemic approach. We would probably lean towards the latter. Again, I will highlight some examples of specific grants and kind of talk through how we view those as scalable towards the end of this conversation. The last thing that I'll mention is that we do welcome proposals where our dollars are part of a larger overall project. So perhaps it is a project that's receiving multiple funders and our $25,000 kind of fits in for a very specific need within the larger project. So I'll talk a little bit about how we evaluate proposals that come in. These are the 6 dimensions that we look at when we are reviewing both letters of interest as well as full applications. And we'll talk briefly about each of these 6 just so that you all have a better sense of kind of our thinking when it comes to evaluating grant proposals. So the first is simply that the proposal meets our baseline criteria. So our grants are up to $25,000. We generally are looking to fund kind of self-contained projects. We are not able within our Spark grant process to award grants that are for general operating, kind of rent, things like that. We're really looking to say, okay, are we supporting a new proof of concept? Are we supporting a pilot program? Are we supporting the expansion of a program? Those are the types of proposals that I think generally will advance within our process. Now, this is probably, I think, what folks are most interested in learning about, which is kind of what are we seeking to fund for this specific cycle? We have three focus areas that we're looking to support within this cycle. We ask organizations to select one of the focus areas that they feel like their project would fall under. Oftentimes I'm asked, can we submit multiple under different focus areas? Can we, have a project that hits two focus areas? Certainly, we realize that sometimes this work may hit multiple of our focus areas. We do ask you to select kind of the primary focus area that you think would hit for your project. And then we provide you with the opportunity to select an additional one or provide us with some information. If you have two, three proposals that you're kind of mulling over, because two focus areas, maybe are of interest to you, I would certainly encourage that you reach out to us. My colleague Miguel Leon is actually the lead when it comes to sort of reviewing and thinking through our student basic needs grant making. His email address is miguel@20mm.org, and I will drop that in the chat. But he would be the best person to reach out to when it comes to asking if there is any intersection between the focus area and your project. He can also guide you to say something along the lines of, you have two ideas that you're interested in submitting. He'd be able to kind of talk you through which one might be the most relevant to what we're looking to fund. I did see something in the chat saying that someone had some connectivity issues. We will share a recording of this presentation with everyone who is registered for the webinar, so no concerns there. You'll also get this slide deck, follow-up likely coming tomorrow from our communications team. So this first focus area really focuses on student housing. This is one of the areas of interest for us in 2026 and kind of moving forward. So we're interested in looking at proposals that kind of have a systemic approach to what student housing and food insecurity could look at. This, could be a variety of different types of proposals. And so we list some options of kind of what our thinking is, but certainly not limited to this. One of our sweet spots that we as an organization really like to work in is sort of the implementation and integration of policy. And so AB 79, basic needs implementation and data coordination, and you'll see some examples of this, but if there was a law or if there was a policy passed and now there needs to be work done to implement that said regulation, we are certainly interested in getting better understanding of that. I think looking at the transfer of public benefits and other resources when students move in between institutions is an area of interest for us, making sure that those students still have those resources available to them as life circumstances need them to transition between institutions. Certainly looking at interesting kind of financing and partnership models when it comes to student housing and food insecurity. And then lastly, and you'll see this kind of as a theme throughout, policy advocacy. So, raising these issues to decision makers and making them aware, that there needs to be action taken on particularly housing as well as food insecurity. The kind of next area, our next focus is on the kind of economic mobility and long-term student stability. So this is obviously a broad category, and I think if you have specific kind of thoughts and questions around this, definitely reach out to my colleague Miguel. But kind of some specific things that we as an organization are thinking about, looking at workforce development pipelines. Specifically, how are those set up to assist low income first generation students, thinking through, what makes sense to support that particular population. Again, looking at sort of housing, but now when it comes to sort of post-graduation, employment transition. So, a student graduates from an institution. How are we supporting them and setting them up to be successful kind of post-college completion? Additionally, we're looking at kind of moving basic needs operations to be more sustainable. So, are there ways that you're thinking about, student basic needs and basic needs operations that would sort of shift away from your reliance on grants, towards a different approach, and kind of setting institutions and programs up to be sustainable? Again, as I mentioned, policy advocacy in and around this. So, making decision makers aware of the needs to strengthen the opportunity for economic mobility. And then lastly, sort of thinking about financing and partnership models in and around that same idea. Our third and final focus area, and this has been an area of interest of ours for a few years now, is emergency student aid. So I'm sure many folks on this call are aware, but lots of research shows that not just students, but most people don't have access to $500 to deal with an emergency as it arises. Let's say a car breaks down or something of that effect. So, we, Dr. Michelson and our organization really thinks through, well, this is a one-time issue that is causing someone to maybe miss school or have to drop out. And are there ways in which that can be addressed so that a student can continue to progress through their educational journey despite having this hiccup when it comes to an emergency type situation? So we're really interested in sort of thinking through how to scale emergency aid and direct financial programs, and getting a better sense of how those programs impact retention, degree completion, et cetera, et cetera. We are also interested in understanding if there are organizations that are supporting students that are ineligible for state or federal aid, and how we could support those programs. Again, looking at kind of innovative financing and partnerships. So if there are kind of unique ways that you all are going about emergency student aid, we'd love to learn a little bit more about it. And then lastly, policy advocacy. So again, kind of getting in front of decision makers and making them aware that, this is a challenge for students and that there are ways in which they can take action to address the situation and provide better supports for students. So we're kind of moving on to that third dimension of evaluation, which is looking at the potential impact of the grant. So we want to get a better sense of how many individuals will be impacted by the grant, what other deliverables or outcomes will be coming. When you submit your proposal, we'll actually ask you to submit your key performance indicators. So we ask organizations to say, here are the ways in which the metrics that we'll utilize to evaluate whether or not this grant is successful. Additionally, we'll look at, I just mentioned this, but what metrics are you proposing to utilize? What is that kind of timeline that you're looking at? How realistic are those metrics? I do get this question quite frequently, what is the length of time that our grants kind of range from? Generally, so we ask in your LOI for y'all to submit sort of the number of months in which you imagine that this project would be kind of ongoing for, or the grant period would last. Generally, what we see is kind of 6 months to 1 year in terms of the types of kind of projects or work that we're funding. But of course, there are sort of outliers. I've seen things, 18 months is probably the upper end of what we've generally seen. But again, if you have specific questions or about, the length of time of the project that you're working on, please feel free to reach out and contact us. The other thing that we want to get a better sense of is the organization that's submitting the proposal. Oftentimes we'll know organizations, oftentimes we won't. And so getting a better sense of, you and your team, who are the individuals who are going to be working working on this project? Why are they sort of best equipped to lead this type? Are there any partners, partner organizations that you imagine working on the project with you? So those types of things are certainly things that we'll review when proposals come through. We are curious to learn about, how your organization is sustained financially. Interested in learning, are there other funders coming in for this particular project? Do you potentially see government dollars down the line? Are there other grants that you all have received kind of in and around this? So just kind of a holistic picture of your organization. And then lastly, I mentioned this a bit earlier, but we are interested in really systems level strategies. So we are curious around what is the potential for this particular project to scale, maybe beyond the grant period. Not necessarily that the grant period would be the scaling work, but again, maybe it is a pilot program that this grant is funding. And then following the grant, like there is potential to, take the learnings from this pilot program, and maybe, ourselves or a coalition or a partnership, would then kind of share that out so that that could then scale across the state. And again, I'll point to some specific projects and some specific examples of things that we funded in the past so that y'all get a better sense of kind of the types of work that I'm talking about. So, we've talked a little bit about the evaluation process, kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of how you go about submitting, what our process is. So, our portal will open on December 1st, and it will remain open until 11:59 p.m. Pacific time on December 15th. If you go to www.20mm.org/spark-grants, you will see there will be a button that day in which you'll be able to submit your proposal. And the other thing that will be available to you now, and apologies, I'm just trying to grab the link so I can drop it in the chat. But if you look at that page now, you will see PDF versions of both our letter of inquiry as well as our full application. So if you are an eager beaver and you want to get started on kind of putting together your LOI prior to that opening on December 1st, those resources are available to you. Please note, and this is actually in my next slide, that we do use Submittable as our grant management system. So we provide these PDFs as an opportunity for you all to kind of start your work. But when you're actually submitting, you'll be submitting through Submittable. So you'll create an account. Please make sure that you safe list that account within your email client. And we do have a reminder when folks go through the kind of LOI process for that. I'm going to drop the link in the chat just so that you have that. Oftentimes we'll see educational institutions are the ones where sometimes things get caught up in a spam filter or something like that. So we just want to make sure that kind of you're receiving communications via Submittable, because that's how we'll let you know that a project has advanced past the LOI stage and sort of have ongoing communication. If there are technical issues with Submittable, you can certainly reach out to us. There'll be contact information when you're logging into Submittable, but you can always directly reach out to Submittable as well. So, nope, I didn't skip a slide. I apologize. So this is our grant committee, made up of 4 of our staff members, including myself, all of whom have been here for some 7, some 13, some over a decade at various parts of Michelson Philanthropies. So in addition to myself, we have Miguel Leon, our Senior Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives. As I mentioned, he's sort of our current lead when it comes to the student basic needs work. His email is miguel@20mm.org. Certainly encourage you to reach out to him between now and December 15th. He wants to kind of provide you with some opportunity to get feedback prior to you submitting an LOI. Our biggest thing is we want to make sure that there is alignment and that y'all aren't doing kind of work that doesn't make sense. So if you're on the fence, you're like, oh, I don't know if this is going to hit the focus area, if this is not going to hit the focus area, definitely shoot Miguel an email. He can either, give you a quick email response. You can hop on and have a quick phone conversation, and maybe in that he'll say, yes, this definitely fits our focus area. Please make sure you're including information X, Y, and Z so we have kind of a holistic picture of the work that you're doing. Or he might say, I'm not quite sure that hits our focus area. And then it sort of saves you all some time and energy when it comes to putting together an LOI when maybe it's not necessarily the right fit. Additionally, we have Myra Lumbera and Phil Kim, who are involved in the grant committee and our senior leadership within Michelson 20mm. In addition to our grant committee, we also have our Spark community advisors. So these are individuals who are working in the field of student basic needs that we have relationships with and have kind of come aboard to advise us for this cycle. They have kind of assisted in first crafting those focus areas that I shared with y'all. And then when we narrow kind of the initial batch of proposals down, they'll be reviewing our finalists and providing feedback on those finalists. And we're getting to that kind of flow of what that step-by-step process is. But we're really grateful that these folks have been able to provide their expertise to our program and really help inform how we think about student basic needs and how we think about this work moving forward. So the evaluation process. You'll submit that LOI, and within about 6 business days or so, you will be notified if your proposal is advancing. Obviously, our call for proposal opens on December 1st, so we do review proposals on a rolling basis. Much like with any deadline, we do see a plethora of those come in right at the deadline, but I would certainly encourage folks to apply early. After we review those LOIs, those that advance will be asked to submit a full application. And again, there's a link to that full application on our Spark Grant site. You'll also receive a copy of it when you submit your LOI. In addition to that full application, and it's noted in that document, but we'll ask you specific questions about the LOI. So in your application, you provide us with some information. We want to get a little bit more, so there'll be kind of customized questions for each organization that's advancing to a full application. We'll review those full applications, and following that, we will identify finalists that we will send to our Spark community advisors. Those SCAs, as we like to call them, will kind of provide us with insights to allow us to sort of make our final decision on who our awardees are. And we'll generally be communicating that decision within about 6 weeks of that closing date. So in January is when we'll be making our decision about what the finalists will be. Oftentimes I'm asked, what is the kind of ratio of LOIs that advance to applications, et cetera, et cetera. I would say generally we'll receive anywhere from 35 to 55 LOIs per cycle. Of those will generally advance about a quarter to a full application. And then we're looking at anywhere from 3 to 5 grants within the funding cycle, just depending on the strength of the cycle, as well as kind of what is hitting which focus area. This is just a visual representation of that evaluation process that I mentioned. So LOI is received, a decision is made on that LOI. If you advance, you would then complete that full application. We would then advance finalists to our Spark community advisors. Following that review, there may be a phone conversation with Miguel to sort of talk through any remaining questions that we have, and then we'll have that final decision made. So I'm just going to kind of wrap up with giving some highlights of previous awardees that we have supported. Again, if you have questions about anything that I've said today, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A. And because after this, I'll be able to kind of dig through that. So the first kind of prior student basic needs Spark grantee that I want to mention is Young Invincibles. And if you remember, I talked a little bit about policy implementation during the focus areas, and I think this is a great example of that. So Young Invincibles had a student-led research project looking at what the implementation is on the $30 million investment for student basic needs centers at community colleges. So there was this, great legislative win, this great policy win, but for those of you working in the space, probably know, the devil is in the details. And so making sure that the implementation is actually effective is something that we're always interested in when it comes to, how policy impacts our students. Cal State University Long Beach. This is a great example of sort of a pilot or work that's done on a specific campus, but then has the ability to support other campuses. So they developed sort of a best practice model for family-friendly campuses via their Pregnant and Parenting Students Initiative. This was a strong area of focus of ours for a few years. But not only did they develop that for their school, but then they worked with the chancellor's office to disseminate those training materials via the CSU Basic Needs Initiative. So again, it's work that's done on a campus, but its impact is kind of beyond just that individual campus. The last one on the student basic needs side that I'll mention, and this was a grantee out of our cycle last year, was California Competes. So their work was focused on making sure that students have the ability to access benefits. And it sort of started with, an initial research work, kind of looking at what benefit programs are available, how the cradle to career data system can sort of streamline that access. And really, what all this research is meant to do is lay the groundwork for a coalition to come together and advocate for the need to address access to these benefits for students. So again, sort of that we're doing this research, we're doing this work now, and we're sort of laying the groundwork for scalable solutions within the state of California. So I'm going to close with just some non-student basic needs Spark grants, because again, I think it sort of speaks to the ethos of the kind of types of projects that we support. UCI Lifted, we supported through our Smart Justice initiative, and they created the first degree granting program in a California state prison within the UC system. So really, again, a pilot program proving out a model. Since our initial funding of UCI Lifted, which is a few years ago now, there have actually been numerous Lifted campuses that have launched throughout the state, and they're taking learnings from that UCI program to support their work. So again, sort of work occurring in one place, but the outcomes of that has the capacity to scale and impact others across the state. Oakland Undivided, this is through our digital equity work. This grant looked at, advertised versus actual internet speeds and gathered data for advocacy. So they collected nearly 500,000 speed tests, working with 15,000 students. And this essentially was a research project that then supported advocacy around making sure that, regardless of your zip code, regardless of your income level, you would have the ability to, have access to high-speed broadband. Unite LA was a great example of where our dollars kind of came in and supported a project that was funded by a lot of other areas as well. So they launched LA Deal, or the LA Digital Equity Action Coalition, with kind of a regional community-driven consortium focus to eliminate the digital divide within kind of the greater California area, or excuse me, the greater Los Angeles area. Again, we were not the sole funder of this project, but our dollars sort of combined with others. And since their initial launch, Unite LA has been really successful in securing government contracts, government funding to sort of expand the growth of their work. We've been very proud to be able to support them in sort of their early development stages. U.S. Public Interest Research Group is one of our grantees through our Open Educational Resources Textbook Affordability Initiative. So, for those of you who are not familiar, recently the textbook publishing industry has transitioned to what we call an automatic billing framework. They call it inclusive access, where essentially students are automatically charged for their instructional materials and don't have the ability to kind of shop around. We supported this research project that looks at kind of some of the challenges and pitfalls when it comes to that, and had recommendations for institutions. If you are entering into these types of contracts, what should you be cognizant of? How should you think about it? So research is often an area that, as I shared with the Oakland Undivided situation, allows advocacy to then be done at an effective level. So that's kind of my presentation. I'm going to head over to Q&A and make sure that I can answer those questions. Like I have kind of continually mentioned, unfortunately, my colleague Miguel was not able to join. So I would certainly encourage you to reach out to him if you have specific questions, because he is our student basic needs expert. But I will do my best to muddle through some of these questions that have been submitted. So the first question, my institution has 3 campuses throughout California, and we're interested in piloting a program that would serve each site. Would stronger projects incorporate external partners to demonstrate scalability, or would our 3 sites fulfill this requirement? That's a great question. Quite honestly, I think it would just be helpful to learn a little bit more about that. So I would certainly recommend that you reach out to Miguel just to provide him with a bit more of an insight. I think 3 campuses is great. I don't think that that's bad in any way, and I think it would still be strong. But I think learning a little bit more about where those 3 campuses are, what the type of project is, and then what those potential partners are. So yeah, a bit more information, and I think Miguel would be able to really answer that question. Would projects that offer direct support to students, such as food or housing, align with the emergency student aid focus area? This is a great question. Generally, our dollars don't go to direct aid for students. We realize that there is a strong need for that. But given that we have limited grant dollars in which we're able to deploy, we feel like our dollars are best kind of focused on kind of more systemic. So we don't generally fund proposals that'll say, we'll provide food or we'll provide direct aid via dollars for students. But again, if there's kind of something I'm missing in the question or some specifics, please do let me know. We received this Basic Needs Spark grant last year and are wondering if we are eligible to receive the grant again. Oh, hey, Jeremy. Yes, no, certainly nothing precludes you from receiving a Spark grant. If you've previously received a Spark grant. I think the only, and Jeremy, I don't remember exactly where y'all are in the grant right now. I think the only question that might arise is if your grant is kind of still ongoing or not close to completion, we might just want some more information about either is this a totally separate project, does this align to the current grant, and then maybe kind of a high level update on where the current grant is. But I know y'all have been kind of partners with us for a bit, so I'm guessing Miguel probably already has a good sense of that. But no, to answer your question directly, like it would not preclude you if you've been previously funded. Would students' incentives for a study of a student basic needs intervention be considered direct report? I would say no. I would not consider that direct report. Yeah, if you're providing incentives for someone to participate, the other thing that I've seen is if students are involved in a project for in some capacity, maybe they're helping with the project, and you're providing them with stipends with some of our grant funds for that. Certainly would be open to that, and I don't think we would consider that sort of like direct support in a student basic needs type of way. Questions are coming fast and furious. I love it. Jen asks, would this grant, I think it's grant, it's just, would this grant cover an organization that provides basic needs via reentry services? Um, I think there could be, yes, I don't think that would be disqualified. I think Jen, my question might be just from our purposes, is that best equipped for our student basic needs work, or is that best equipped for our smart justice work, or maybe a hybrid of the two? So I would encourage you to send an email to Miguel with kind of some specifics about kind of what you're thinking, because I think that would then allow uh, us to kind of have a better sense of that, but certainly wouldn't disqualify you. I think it just might be more what would be most appropriate in terms of like our programs and how we think about the work. So yeah, certainly shoot Miguel an email. I'm going to drop his email in the chat again, just in case folks joined a little bit late. But Miguel is kind of best equipped to be able to answer any sort of specific questions about your specific projects. It looks like I had all the questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to give it about another minute or so, just in case someone is furiously typing. But really appreciate everyone coming on today to learning a little bit more. Please don't hesitate to reach out, in advance of our cycle opening. While our cycle is opening, you will receive a recording of this with the presentation as well as a few other resources if you've registered for this. But with that, I will end our discussion and really hope that everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. Talk to y'all later.